it's big, but it's certainly not beautiful. It just makes the deficits that Trump inherited from Biden bigger. There's increases in government spending, and the only cuts come in later years. They'll probably never materialize, but even if they did, they're not enough to offset the spending increases and the other tax cuts that are contributing to even larger federal budget deficits, which are going to further undermine the U.S. economy.
Peter, great to be speaking with you. Let's reflect on the week that President Trump has had, touring the Middle East, going to various countries on the way, and I think overall setting the past aside to some extent in the interests, it would seem, of peace and, well, profit. Has he gone looking to the right place to make America some money?
Well, I think it was probably a good week for the president because we had some bad weeks before that in the aftermath of, Liberation Day and the tariffs that were announced. So I think that was probably a positive to divert attention, away from that. I don't know, to the extent the various deals that he may have helped negotiate down there. I mean, I don't necessarily like deals that involve governments, but as long as they're private companies, that's great. I mean, to the extent that there are some deals there. I know that the Qatar airline is owned by the government, so it was the U.S. with the Qatar government made a deal with Boeing. But sure, yeah. I mean, I think that particular part of the world offers a lot of opportunities, and certainly American businesses should try to take advantage of them.
The numbers are really quite huge. So Qatar and the US agreeing a $1.2 trillion economic exchange, Saudi Arabia promising to invest $600 billion in the US, and then there were major projects signed with the UAE, and that follows actually a commitment back in March to a 10-year, $1.4 trillion investment framework is how it's referred to in the US on the part of the UAE. Well, is this going to be something that's welcomed by business, by those private companies you speak of at home in the US?
Well, I don't even know what those investments entail or what the actual commitment is to make them. I know that oftentimes they throw around a lot of big numbers because they make headlines, but we'll see what actually happens. But certainly, they're free to make investments in the United States if they want to, if they think those are, going to be good investments for them. Depending on what they buy and how they buy it, I'd have an opinion as to the impact on the United States. But I don't even really know, what's going to happen. It's just like an abstract number. Yes, we're going to invest all this money, but we'll actually see what happens.
What is the situation at home? Trump's been talking a lot about deals, making deals. The UK is one such deal that he has been talking about. He was referring to his big deal with China as well, which was the kind of reduction in those huge tariffs from Liberation Day. What is the picture at home? What is your assessment of Trump and his economic? Does he have an economic philosophy?
I don't really know. I mean, I think he does talk about the need to have less government and get government, out of the way of the markets, which is great. But I don't see any legislation that's really moving us in that direction. I mean, I really wish he was, making deals with Congress, not trying to make deals with other countries on trade. I think that the problems that America has with respect to our trade deficit have nothing to do with other countries, that they're self-inflicted wounds. We've undermined our own industrial capacity with bad monetary and fiscal policy and regulatory policy. And that's what we need to address rather than blaming the rest of the world for our problems and trying to, paint the United States as some kind of victim that has been ripped off and taken advantage of by the rest of the world. I think is counterproductive to actually solving the real problems. And in particular, this new big, beautiful bill that is being shepherded through the Congress that the president is waiting to put his John Hancock on. I would like to see him pushing back against that and threatening to veto that bill because it's big, but it's certainly not beautiful. It just makes the deficits that Trump inherited from Biden bigger. There's increases in government spending, and the only cuts come in later years. They'll probably never materialize, but even if they did, they're not enough to offset the spending increases and the other tax cuts that are contributing to even larger federal budget deficits, which are going to further undermine the U.S. economy.
Did he surrender to China in the trade war that lasted whatever it was, less than 100 days?
Yeah, I mean, I think it amounts to a surrender because Donald Trump imposed these, 145% tariffs on Americans buying Chinese goods. And obviously, that is a problem for companies operating in China that would no longer be able to sell goods to Americans because they couldn't afford to pay those high tariffs. And initially, when Trump put those tariffs on, he postured as if they would stay there until China agreed to some kind of great deal and made a lot of concessions that would somehow shrink their trade surplus. I don't really know what China could have done there because they don't have very high tariffs. The main reason that we have such a huge trade deficit is because the dollar is so overvalued, I think, relative to the RMB. And, if the dollar were to go down, that would help out, but that would cause a whole new set of problems that the president probably doesn't want to deal with respect to higher inflation and interest rates here in the U.S. But, Trump took the position that those tariffs were going to stay there until, China caved in and agreed to whatever we were demanding. And China's position was, we're not going to negotiate until these tariffs are removed. And then China imposed tariffs of its own of 125%. And the only thing that the two sides really agreed to do was to substantially lower those tariffs, which China never wanted those tariffs. China only imposed them in retaliation to the ones we put in. And the purpose of the Chinese tariffs was to get us to lower ours, which we did. And, now these two sides are apparently negotiating. But I think that's a win for China because we're negotiating on China's terms, which are with the tariffs reduced. Trump initially said, no, these tariffs are here as leverage, and we're not going to get rid of them until, you make a deal. And, China's position was, we're not even discussing deals until you get rid of the tariffs. And, the tariffs are gone and there's no real deal yet. I'm not even sure, what's being discussed. And in fact, now Trump has already backtracked on all the other deals that they were going to negotiate because he said now they're not going to have the negotiations with all these countries that supposedly were lining up to kiss Trump's ass and begging for deals. Now Trump is saying, I'm just going to fire off a bunch of letters and I'm going to inform all these countries of what their tariff rates are going to be. So it's not, something to negotiate. Trump is just going to determine on his own, what tariffs are going to be imposed. But, the way Trump tells the story, this is how much he's going to charge these countries for the privilege of doing business in the United States. But that's not what a tariff is. The tariff doesn't charge foreign countries anything. The tariff applies to Americans. It's the charge that the U.S. government is going to impose on American citizens if they want to do business with these foreign countries. So that's where the letters should go. I mean, Trump should address the letters to the American citizens and send those out and say, in the future, here's what it's going to cost you if you want to buy goods from each of these different countries.
It is fascinating to hear your take, Peter, because I'm trying to work out in all of this and in the week that's just been and in the weeks that we've seen of this presidency, whether the approach is coherent, whether it makes sense, whether an economist, an expert like you can trace the thread through Trump's thinking in all that we've seen, whether it's China, the UK, or the Middle East over the last few days. Is there a coherence to what you are witnessing?
Well, I sympathize with Donald Trump's recognition that we have a serious problem in this country that has led to these enormous trade deficits that really has been bleeding the country. We've hollowed out our manufacturing infrastructure, our supply chains, and we've been selling off our assets. The U.S. is the world's largest debtor nation. We owe more money than all the other debtor nations of the world combined. Not too long ago, we were the world's largest creditor nation, and we used to run consistent trade surpluses. And so we're a shadow of what we used to be. And so America is in decline. And Donald Trump would very much like to arrest that decline and turn it around. And I share that goal. But the problem with the president is he doesn't really understand the root cause of the problem. And he's focusing on the symptoms, which are the trade deficits, rather than the disease that has resulted in those trade deficits, which comes from a U.S. economy that where we don't save enough, and we spend too much, we borrow too much, we don't produce enough. And this has come about because of the tax code and the regulations and the artificially low interest rates, and are exploiting the dollar's reserve currency status to live beyond our means. I mean, we're able to trade the dollars that we create out of thin air for the products that the rest of the world produces at substantial cost to themselves. They have to expend scarce resources, land, labor, and capital to produce consumer goods, which Americans basically get for nothing. We just create money. Now, of course, to the extent that foreigners take those dollars and they buy our assets, they buy our real estate, they buy our stocks, they buy our bonds, they are accumulating these assets. And now we have to pay interest abroad, we have to pay dividends, we have to pay rent. But, in the short run, we've also had the benefit of all of that, all of those recycled surpluses. We have a very high stock market as a result of that. And so Americans who have stock, are richer. Our interest rates are much lower than they would otherwise be. So it makes it cheaper for everybody to borrow. So not only has the world provided us with goods that we don't produce, they've loaned us the money that we don't save. And that, has benefited the government because it's been able to finance these huge deficits. People have been able to borrow money to buy houses, cars, credit cards. All of this is a byproduct of this trading relationship, which in the long run is harmful to the American economy. But in the short run, we get a high. We get to live beyond our means, and but at the expense of really undermining our future prosperity when we're going to have to pay these bills. And so Trump understands this, but his approach is wrong, and it's not going to work. I mean, it may actually exacerbate the problems that he's hoping to solve, because the tariffs are just going to make what's left of American industry even less competitive. Meanwhile, the underlying problems will get worse if we keep running up larger deficits. And in fact, one of the things that Trump is advocating for is that the Fed cut rates. And that's, why we're in this predicament. Rates have been too low for too long. We need much higher interest rates. If we're going to reindustrialize, where is the money going to come from to pay for that? It's going to have to come out of savings so that we can make the capital investments that we need. Well, nobody's going to save any money if interest rates are so low. So we need interest rates that are high enough to prevent people from just going out and borrowing and buying stuff, and to encourage them to save so that we have the capital to make these investments. But Trump doesn't want that. He wants low interest rates. He probably wants the Fed to go back to QE, or he will. And that's, again, going to undermine the progress that he's hoping to make.